This is Friday evening's Undercard. On our wrestling show today, WrestleMania sells out, a little person gets squashed, and Ricky Steamboat hits an arm drag. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Friday Evening's Undercard. I'm Gentleman John. He's Electrifying Eric. We're your hosts. Eric, how you doing, buddy?
Pretty good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. What are we talking about on this little show we've got here today, man?
We are talking about WrestleMania 3.
WrestleMania 3, pinnacle of 1980s WWF wrestling.
From the Silverdome, brother.
From the Silverdome, brother. First of two WrestleManias at the Silverdome. All right, man. Let's start off with like the disputed thing about WrestleMania 3. 93,173 people in the Silverdome.
Or so they say.
Or so they say. You know, Dave Meltzer said there was 78,000 people there. I don't know if there was 93,000 paid, but I think there was more than 73,000 people there. Or 78,000, which is what Meltzer says.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like any attendance thing. How do you actually judge it? I mean, I've been to a lot of events where, you know, they'll give you the announced attendance, but you look around and you're like, is it really that number? You know? I mean, all I know is when you watch it back, that place was packed.
And that's what I was thinking, because they opened the show up. I don't think it's an accident that show started at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in a stadium that's lit up.
Yeah.
They did some wide-angle shots of that crowd, and it is packed.
Well, it kind of reminds me, too, of even like what they did at WrestleMania 8 when they were in the Hoosier Dome. That same dynamic. Yep. You know, they want to show that crowd early to show just, you know, how huge this event is. I don't know how easy you could get that shot later in the day.
No, because, you know, when you get late into the day during the main event, it's black.
Yeah.
But just talking about the capacity of the building, they had over 81,000 people in there for the Super Bowl. And obviously when you're playing football, there's this great big space in the middle of the building where you just don't have people.
Right.
And there was people where the field would have been. There was very few empty seats. There's a number of stories out there of people that said they snuck into the building.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe it's not 93,000, but I do think it's pretty close.
Yeah, I think, you know, I mean, and even when we were at WrestleMania 30, I mean, we were in the Superdome, you know, not as big, but we saw how much they can pack into that area. You know, I mean, I think anything that they could have put a seat in, they were certainly going to do there.
And the thing with the Superdome is they had that massive set.
Very true. That's, you know, a big departure from what you would have seen in the 80s.
That they didn't have at Mania 3. I mean, they had a tarp coming over the tunnel, and that was it.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, I think if you look at any of the, you know, I mean, there's an entire generation that has kind of grown up on more what I would consider a modern WrestleMania. You know, where it's sort of the spectacle. Certainly they had that at WrestleMania 3, but it wasn't the, you know, for lack of a better term, the set design that sold the show.
Right. You know? Yeah. It was the wrestling that sold the show.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, I don't know if you could take, I mean, you know, and you had some pretty good matches on this show, but I think, you know, you could take a lot of WrestleManias that we've had recently. They're very interchangeable. With the, you know, the looks are a little different, but, you know, you could take one card from one to the other. I think the early WrestleManias, it was really card driven as far as just being the event.
I went through and read some article. I don't remember where it was from, ESPN, or maybe it was from one of the Detroit newspapers. But they did this big, long, or maybe it was from WWE. It was this big, long oral history of WrestleMania 3. And I don't remember if it was Okerlund or who it was, but somebody had said that, you know, they had only sold maybe 25,000 tickets before they announced the Hulk Andre match.
Mm-hmm.
And when they announced that match, that's when they started selling tickets. And so I think that was back, like now, WrestleMania is sold out before they even announce the card.
Right.
But back then, you were still drawing the house based on who was there.
Yeah, I mean, I know when we went to Mania, we weren't going because we knew what the matches were going to be. Heck, when we decided to go to that, we just knew Mania is going to be in New Orleans.
Just knew
that's all we knew.
That's all we knew. Yeah.
And who knows who's going to be there. So I think that's the difference. I mean, I think too, if you look at the WrestleMania history, one, they're just trying to get it off the ground. Yeah. This is really where I think WrestleMania as we know it is starting to be really fine-tuned.
Right.
Right. And I think that's the, and this is also, you could argue too, a major match, like a generational level match, as your main event.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you had, Hogan, literally the biggest star of that era.
Absolutely.
Going up against, physically the biggest star of that era.
Yeah.
And it was just a perfect setup.
Now, here's something interesting I came up with, and obviously we'll get talking about the Hogan Andre match in a little while. Are you aware that WrestleMania 3 is not the only show they ran at the Silverdome?
I did not know that.
It's not. They ran, I think it was 7 house shows at the Silverdome.
Wow.
They didn't use the whole field because what I didn't realize was that the Pistons used the Silverdome as their home court for a number of years.
Huh. Oh, yeah.
It was like 10 years the Pistons were in the Silverdome. And so there's actually some pretty cool pictures out there of what the Silverdome looks like if you're looking from the upper deck down onto the basketball setup.
Right.
But just to sort of show that it was not just Hulk Hogan that was the draw, that there was still a draw from the feud with Andre, and that there was a draw from WrestleMania being this big show. I went and looked. The next show that they did after WrestleMania was October 23rd of 87, and they got 6,625 people.
There you go.
And the basketball setup could hold 40,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what they drew when they did the All-Star game there one year. And honestly, it was a heck of a card that they put down. I wrote it down. Lanny Poffo beat Barry Horowitz. I mean, okay, that's the opening match.
There's a 5-star right there.
Coco Ware beat Bob Orton. Butch Reed beat superstar Billy Graham. Intercontinental champion, the Honky Tonk Man, beat Brutus Beefcake. The Bulldogs beat Demolition by disqualification. Don Morocco beat Hercules. Ron Bass beat Hillbilly Jim. That's an electrifying match.
That was a technical masterpiece.
And the world heavyweight champion, Hulk Hogan, defeated Killer Khan. I got to admit, I don't know much about Killer Khan. I probably should have looked him up, but I really don't know much of anything about Killer Khan.
I mean, in all honesty, I've heard the name.
And that's exactly where I am. I've heard the name, but I don't know where we are. I'm just gonna assume this is like another monster heel that Hogan has to dispatch, Yeah, or it was some big heel from the Detroit territory days or something like that they thought would, draw a crowd. I can't see it being, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, it's, and that really fit in. I mean, if you think about it too, with Hogan, think about what he sort of symbolized. I mean, this is right at the peak of his, all-American status.
Right.
We could probably do a deep dive into the symbolism of the Hogan character of that era. I mean, we're in the 80s. We're still in the Cold War.
Absolutely.
You know, these monster heels, you know, whether we're doing it consciously or not, I mean, it sort of, in my mind, symbolizes the Soviet Union. And we're not talking Nikolai Volkov coming out there. You know, I
No.
mean, I think it's this, you know, America will persevere over this, you know, massive foe that seems unbeatable.
Although with Iron Sheik back in '84, there may have been more of a literal connection with that one.
Oh, that just books itself.
Yeah.
You know, well, let's just say in '84, Iran was not on the United States Christmas card list.
No, they were not getting Christmas cards that year. All right, man. Well, that's as far as the building goes. That's about all you can say about the building. You know. What about Aretha during the performance of America the Beautiful?
You know, I think it's once again, yeah, I think this is where they really established WrestleMania as being an event. You know, you could argue that some of the ones in the 90s weren't so much that, but I think you see where we look at, you know, the differences between an early WrestleMania to a WrestleMania you're going to see now. I think one thing that you do sort of see the commonality between the two sort of bookends, if you will, is this celebrity factor.
Right, right.
And, you know, however they have to weave them in, they will. And that's kind of become part of the DNA of WrestleMania, that it's, you know, which I think is why it was ultimately able to sort of transcend just another wrestling show.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly the grandeur of it. I mean, they're doing huge stadiums and arenas early, which they kind of do now, you know, which is kind of common. But I think it's the factor of, you know, having people that have more mainstream appeal. And I think it's also, you know, sort of trying to move wrestling out of the, you know, basically it's carnies and a bunch of big drunks fighting,
Right,
you know, to make it be a little more respectable, so to speak.
Yeah. And one funny story that I heard about that, apparently traffic was so bad coming to the Silverdome that day, Aretha almost missed the show.
That would have been interesting.
That
I mean,
yeah, that would have been really interesting had she missed that show.
I mean, because it's not like today where you can just, you know, trot Lillian out to sing.
No, yeah, well, if she's even in the building anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know if she's still there. I mean, she was at one point. Or, I mean, I don't know. You just skip it, I guess.
Yeah.
Because have they done that in the last couple years? I don't think they did that
No.
when we were there.
Yeah, I mean, they did National Anthem.
Did they?
I think so. I'm pretty sure they did.
It wasn't part of the program.
No, it wasn't.
Because you had like the, I don't know, whatever, the cold open of the program was some, it was like a video package that they did down on Bourbon Street. And then I think it was like some ridiculous Kid Rock song. And then Hulk Hogan's music hit.
Yeah.
And, you know, that.
And he blew the roof off the Silverdome, brother.
You know, off the Silverdome. And so that was, you know, that was the cold open for Mania 30. And one other thing about the Aretha Franklin performance, they were like panning over. So you're seeing like the crowd that's sitting right behind her. And there was this guy, I know it's not because he would have been like 30 years old at the time. There's this guy sitting behind Aretha Franklin that looks just like Jim Cornette. Kind of this like wiry hair, gigantic glasses, like the red sport jacket, like the whole package. Like it looks just like modern day Jim Cornette sitting behind Aretha as she's playing the piano.
Well, I don't know. At that time, was Jim Cornette even allowed to go north of the Mason-Dixon line?
I don't think so. I think Detroit would have gotten him too close to Canada, and you know he don't like traveling foreign.
No, he doesn't. Yeah, I think I don't know if that was in his territorial travelings at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, man. What do we have for these matches on the Mania card? Unlike today when it takes 17 hours to do a WrestleMania, they only had 3 hours to get it done back then. First match on the card was Cowboy Bob Orton and Don Morocco going against the Can-Am Connection. Rick Martel and Tom Zink.
Well, I mean, Zink and Martel both were pretty good workers.
They were, and they actually worked a good match. Obviously, Orton is in the late stages of his career by that point. I don't think Don Morocco, while he was a great wrestler, I don't think anybody would have ever mixed Don Morocco up with being Bret Hart or Daniel Bryan or CM Punk. He was always like this big brawler, and it's just what he was.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of really two contrasting styles. I mean, probably most people when they think of Rick Martel, they're going to think of his later run as being the model.
The model, yep.
But he even had like a run late in even in WCW after that. That had a pretty decent run.
He did, and he had a great run in the AWA. He was the AWA World Heavyweight Champion.
And of course, we strike force later with Tito Santana.
Right. Yep. Ventura made a comment. Obviously, a good place in the event to have this comment. He's like, "This is the biggest event in the history of wrestling," and you hear him say that, and especially now, watching back 32 years later, you're like, you got a point there, Jess.
It is.
There were probably some that were, maybe you could argue that were bigger or whatever, but yeah, I mean that was pretty much it. I mean, it was Mania 3, and that was what you had.
Well, and I think for this, WrestleMania 1 is always going to be important because it's the first. It's like the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
The Super Bowl 1 really wasn't that great of a game, but it was the first. But I think WrestleMania 3 really starts showing the viability of this thing. Can it be more than just, we do a big show every year? I mean, hey, there's plenty of places that did big shows every year. At this time you still had territories. That every territory would have had their big show, but I think this kind of went beyond that. And
yeah, they would have, but I mean, even the biggest of the territory shows wouldn't have even come close to what this one did.
No, you're not pulling 93,000, give or take, at a territory show.
I want to say I looked it up, that other than WWE events, the biggest event, well, technically the biggest event ever in America not done by WWE is the Monday Nitro that they did in the Georgia Dome.
Yeah.
Where they had 44,000 people or whatever. At least as far as I can tell. I mean, there may be something way, way back in the 30s where we just don't have good records. But of the ones that are like listed online, it's the Georgia Dome show, and then it's the Von Erich Memorial in Texas Stadium where Kerry Von Erich beat Ric Flair for the belt. But other than that, WWE is it. And I think this was really the start of that.
Well, and it also, I think it sends a message. I mean, because even in the mid to late 80s, there's still, I think, a hope from a lot of promoters in the territories. They may be able to hold on to this thing. They may be able to, we put a good product out, we have local TV, we can probably survive. Right. I think WrestleMania 3 sort of is the moment where I think a lot of people, whether or not they knew it at the time, immediately, but you can sort of see this thing we see where the industry is trending.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was not too long after that where, Bill Watts went out of business, the AWA went out of business, Memphis hung around for a long time. But yeah,
well, and
87, yeah, you're right, was pretty much
and I think where we're looking like 90, 91 is when the Crockett's sold, their promotion to Ted Turner.
Something like that, yeah, right in that area.
Yeah, so I mean, you're seeing, I think the only way, I think they realize if you're going to survive, you gotta have national television, you gotta have somebody that has a lot of money backing you.
Yeah. And anyway, we were talking about like a match.
Yeah, we were actually.
We were talking about a match. Yeah, the match ended. Morocco was hit with a double drop kick, and then he took this high cross body. He fell back over, I don't remember if it was Martel or Zink. One of them hit him with the cross body, and the other one was laying behind him. 1, 2, 3 for the pinfall.
And, of course, classic, WWF booking at the time. The faces go over the heels.
Faces go over the heels, that's true.
I think you see that time and time again at these early events, is that generally speaking, in key match placements, you're going to see the baby faces go over.
So you put the face over there in the front, you get the crowd happy to start with, and then you kind of work in from there. Second match on the card, Billy Jack Haynes against Hercules. Anything about that match? I mean, it was kind of it was okay, but...
Well, I mean, it's a double count out.
Yeah.
That's, what really more can you say about that? But it does have, one of my favorite personalities in wrestling history, Bobby Heenan.
Absolutely.
So,
Bobby Heenan.
So that makes, it's got to give, you got to give some credit to that. So...
And he's got 93,000 people screaming "Weasel" at him.
Well,
so
that's
something too.
This will be Bobby Heenan's first appearance in the show. He'll be reoccurring time and time again.
He does. He was a busy man that night.
The Heenan family, those branches ran deep.
Yeah. I don't know. Just a couple things I had. There was one shot where you could look up in the roof of the Silverdome, and there was this giant Marlboro cigarettes ad. And obviously watching today, that's really weird to see.
Yeah.
Because now you don't see cigarette ads anywhere. And I think actually I just read something online that whoever it is that is the parent company for Marlboro, they're going out of business. Or they're not going out of business. They're stopping making cigarettes. So that's a weird ad to see. And yeah, like you say, double count out. Herc comes back in. He hits Billy Jack with the chain, and it's just this obvious blade job. He's laying over in the corner, and you see him with the taped finger come over and just drag it across his head, just right on the camera.
Well, you gotta get a little color early. That's nothing wrong with that.
And I feel like Vince couldn't have been all that happy that it was just so obvious that he was blading.
Yeah, and this is also, basically for the second match of the show. When are you're never going to see that on a WWE show today.
Oh, no.
Not on purpose. Somebody may get busted open hard way, but, you're never going to see that second match of a show happening now.
No. Anything else for that one?
Yeah, I think we can move on from that one.
Now, next match is you got the comedy spot with the little people.
Talk about a throwback to, a classic, pro wrestling sort of staple.
Yeah.
I can remember going to WCW shows in the Cumberland County Civic Center in Fayetteville, North Carolina. There's cheap pop right there for anybody listening to Fayetteville. But, they had that there, and this is even in the 90s when they were doing that. So, it's comedy. You got Hillbilly Jim, clearly, a fan favorite, rock and roll wrestling guy, and then you got King Kong Bundy, this big, massive 400-pounder. And then you got the little people. It's comedy. It's not meant to be a classic. I think that match probably, if that went 4 minutes, I doubt that.
It may have been a little bit longer than that. But, there was nothing to it. Bob Uecker is up there on commentary, and he just made this ridiculous comment. It was when so obviously the little people, there's Little Tokyo, Lord Littlebrook, the Haiti Kid, and Little Beaver. And Little Beaver was doing some spot where he's just running all around the ring, and Euchre is just like, man, there's Little Beaver all over this place. And I'm just like, oh gosh.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, outside of the Attitude Era, there's certain things that in pro wrestling that just do not age well,
No,
Uh,
no. You're just like, oh man, come on.
I'm just waiting for the day when we hear Michael Cole talking about Little Beaver running all over the place.
Good grief.
We'll probably move on from this match now.
Yeah.
We've probably actually talked longer about it than it actually took. So.
Yeah, I will say the only other thing I noted was that, like, wow, man, King Kong Bundy was the main event of WrestleMania 2, and now he's working the comedy match with the little people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's rough. They go back to an interview with Macho Man and Liz and Mary Hart, and obviously Mary Hart's trying to interview Liz, and Macho Man comes in being like he is. Liz always looks like afraid of him, which I think it does.
Probably was.
It's one of those things that doesn't really age well, but it does well to get him over as a heel.
Yep.
Then Savage said something like, "My phone number's on the back of my license plate." When he was talking to Mary Hart, and I was like, wow, man.
We could probably do an entire show of the brilliance that was Macho Man promos.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Especially in this era. This is kind of like this is when he's really at the peak of his game in many ways, which says something because, he's going to have a career that's going to extend, over 10 years after this.
Absolutely.
But this is really, I think, this is sort of that primo era of Macho Man that I think is going to last for, a couple of years.
Yeah. Next match on the card was Harley Race, who was working as the King at this time because he won the 86 King of the Ring against the Junkyard Dog.
Well, if you look at this, if you would look at this match right now in 87, you'd have that match happen just a couple of years earlier. This would have been a huge territory match. This could have been a main event in a lot of territories.
Absolutely. Yeah, you take this event and put it in 1982 Mid-South Wrestling, and this is something that you could have, filled up the Superdome with.
Oh, absolutely.
Race was obviously getting a little older here. He was 44 years old. JYD was sort of on the decline too. He was not the worker that he was even just 3 or 4 years earlier. I don't really have a heck of a lot to say about this one. There was not much to it.
Yeah, it's
which is really sad because how what it could have been, just a couple years earlier.
Yeah, and I think that's just the nature of the beast in pro wrestling, and I think we see that guys that only a few years earlier this could have been a really great match. Just age catches up to everybody in the business.
Yep. The only real spot from that match is where Race tried to do his diving headbutt out onto the floor, and he just completely, basically belly flops it down onto the floor, and it's like, wow. And obviously Race says he kind of regrets starting that diving headbutt thing because, like, other than him, pretty much everybody that's done it, they haven't turned out so well.
Well, it's, I think you will look. In a lot of these matches from this era, you're going to see moves that you will not see today. It's just not happening.
And I think something else that we've lost now is that Harley Race did that spot at WrestleMania 3 in front of, 100,000 people. You've got guys that do that spot now, wrestling in a barn in front of 40 or 50 people. And I think that's the difference.
Well, and I think too, I think if you would have a lot of, more modern fans watching it, they may in some ways find this product more boring than what they're used to.
Yeah.
I mean, because you think what a high spot was in the 80s compared to what it is today.
True.
It's
Yeah.
night and day. But I think what's lost is I think sometimes the spots are great, but if you just have a bunch of guys doing big moves, does the match really tell anything? Does it really tell a story?
Yeah.
And I think that's what I think a lot of these matches, if you watch them for what they are, even though we might say, hey, it's a 4 or 5 minute match, it played a role. It was part of this bigger story of WrestleMania that I think, a lot of matches today on pay-per-views, you watch them, you're kind of like, all right, well, that was nice. We've seen this match before,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, the next match on the show, the Dream Team against the Rougeau Brothers. The Rougeau Brothers... Oh, actually, I'm sorry. The Dream Team came down with Luscious Johnny and Dino Bravo. Yeah, I don't... Nothing?
I mean, Jacques was great as the Mountie.
He was. And obviously, Brutus turned face during this
Right.
match. That'll actually come up in the next match, but... Other than that, the Dream Team won with Dino Bravo interfering, and that was it.
Yep.
Next match is allegedly Rowdy Roddy Piper's retirement match against Adrian Adonis.
Which, prefacing for our new fans, anytime a wrestler says it's his retirement match, they're probably not retiring.
It's probably not. The only one that's even come close to a real retirement match. I mean, when they weren't 75 years old. I mean, I think, some of these guys, Terry Funk, he had a retirement match a couple years ago when he was, 74, 75 years old. So, yeah, I mean, he is pretty much done now. But it was really Shawn Michaels.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty much it. I mean, he came back for that stupid Saudi Arabia show earlier this year, but other than that, like, that's it.
Yeah. And I mean, and also when he left, he was still, an incredibly great wrestler at that time when he left too.
Absolutely.
I mean, he had years left in the tank. But I guess there's something to be said for going out at a reasonable level than, watch a Terry Funk match, within, say, 5-6 years ago,
Oh, yeah, it's just terrible.
It's sad. And so, there's something to be said for going out when you still have, something to still left in the tank.
Absolutely. With the Adonis match, Adonis moves pretty good, but he's really out of shape, and that's kind of why he has the gimmick that he has here and not the old, like, biker gimmick, because Vince kind of was like, yeah, whatever. He does the upside down over the top rope spot that obviously everybody's used to seeing Ric Flair do that spot. But he was like the third person of the night to do that spot. Because they did it in the first match. Don Morocco did it. He did it. And I think Harley Race did it too. I don't remember that. But there was like 3 or 4 people that did that spot that night. And it's just like, oh my gosh, come on. Jimmy Hart tries to interfere. He gets thrown and bumped around. Adonis puts Piper in a sleeper, and he turns it loose before Piper's arm drops the third time. Brutus Beefcake comes out. And, I guess had I not been listening to a podcast about Mid-South Wrestling, I wouldn't have understand what he was doing. But I guess, like, the whole thing back then was you put somebody in a sleeper, and they go out, and you just kind of tap them on the back a few times, and they wake back up.
Yep.
So Brutus comes out, and he's, like, slapping him on the back, and... there comes Piper back to life, and he gets, Adonis in a sleeper. And gosh, there's this one scene, and it's just like etched in my mind, and I wish it wasn't, where Adonis is like laying there like wallering around, and its legs are like really wide, and you just like everything sitting there like hanging down, like, oh my gosh, it's terrible. And like that is just not what the world wants to see, man.
No, the people were not paying to see that in the Silverdome that evening.
No, they were not paying to see that. And then obviously, okay, Adonis is out. Brutus Beefcake comes in with the shears, and that's kind of how he gets his start in the barber gimmick.
Yep.
And that's about it for that one. Although I will say this is one of Adonis's last matches in the WWF, because he was gone not too long after this, and then obviously he died not terribly long after that.
Well, and that's and I think too, this is very much a transition period.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see guys that you see some mainstays of, say, the pre-WrestleMania era, WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 2, but then you're going to see some names that you're going to be seeing for the next 5, even 10 years.
Absolutely.
Later with WWF. So it's kind of an interesting era of, being a major show, but it's also very much a transition point for the company, because you can see a lot of these guys, you'll see them later in different roles, and others, this is kind of the last we'll see of them.
Absolutely. And, speaking of, transitions and people that you're going to see for a long time, the next match, Hart Foundation, Jim Neidhart and Bret Hart with Danny Davis against the Bulldogs, Davey Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid and Tito Santana. Obviously there's like a lot of history with this one that if you just watch the show, you don't quite get it. Pretty solid match overall, but there was nothing that really stood out.
Although it is one of the longer matches on the show.
Yeah.
Not counting, Macho and Steamboat or your main event. But, some pretty good workers in this match. And actually two of the better, tag teams in WWF history as well. And also double duty for Jimmy Hart as well.
Yeah.
So back-to-back matches. So
second match for Jimmy Hart. Danny Davis pins Davey Boy after he hit him with Jimmy Hart's megaphone, and that was pretty much it.
Standard Jimmy Hart type finish.
Yeah, standard finish. The next match is something we can spend a couple minutes on here, because it is pretty unique as far as 80s matches go, where you actually had job guys who won matches. And that's Butch Reed against Koko Ware. So just to give a short rundown of Koko's record leading into this show, and I'll kind of go through it quick. Superstars of Wrestling on December 6th of 86, he beat Bobby Colt. Wrestling Challenge on December 7th, he beat Rick Renslow. Superstars on December 20th, he teamed up with the Killer Bees, and he beat 3 job guys. Like, they were guys that wrestled 3 or 4 matches ever. Wrestling Challenge on December 28th, he beat Frenchie Martin, another just real superstar there. Superstars on January 24th, he beat Steve Lombardi, the future Brooklyn Brawler. Wrestling Challenge in February of 87, he loses to Harley Race after Bobby Heenan interferes and Danny Davis is the referee. So he took a loss on TV, but there was a lot going on there. Because obviously Harley Race is even at that point was just a legend. I mean, everybody would have known he was the NWA champion.
Absolutely.
Heenan interfering, and then Danny Davis, the crooked referee. That was when they were trying to run that. They were starting the program with Danny Davis being crooked. February 8th, he beats Jimmy Jack Funk. Superstars on February 21st of 87, he beats the Red Demon, whoever that is. Wrestling Challenge, he beats Iron Mike Sharp.
There's a classic jobber right there.
Absolutely. The March 9th episode of Primetime Wrestling, they showed a match from Madison Square Garden where he beats Sika. So again, that's a match that would have been on TV in the New York market. And obviously when it went on Primetime Wrestling, it was nationwide on USA.
Right.
Superstars on March 14th, he beats Barry O. Saturday night's main event, he didn't win the Battle Royal, but he was one of the last 4. He eliminated Butch Reed because obviously they were feuding going into Mania, and he got taken out by Hercules. So really strong showing going in there. And then the last televised match that he would have had prior to Mania, March 22nd, he beats Johnny K9. Another just legendary name in wrestling. And then the whole time he's doing that, he's losing house show matches. He's losing house show matches to Bret Hart, Harley Race, Paul Orndorff, the Honky Tonk Man. Because, and you know, you almost wish they would do this now rather than just having, what's that guy's name? It's Kurt Hawkins.
Right.
You know, like, oh, somebody's going against Kurt Hawkins. Well, okay, I guess they're winning. But, like, who cares? Because everybody knows that Kurt's going to lose. It's not like the guy coming out with brown boots and brown trunks who's just some whatever, you know, and then Coco beats him. Like, it was real. Like, you knew this guy was real because every time somebody sees Coco on TV, he's winning matches.
Right.
And so he goes to work that house show, and now it means something that Bret beat him.
Well, and it was almost like, you know, you have your classic jobbers, which we've kind of, you know, in some respects have sort of moved away from. You know, even the jobbers today are names, you know.
Right, right.
But, I mean, you mentioned Kurt Hawkins. I mean, that's a great example of that. But I think, you know, what you had was you had your jobbers that, hey, Coco Beware can beat them. So he's winning. You see him as a potential threat. And then, you know, he sort of serves as like, you know, if the jobbers are sort of at the very bottom, you know, Coco's right above that, and then you got like your mid-card guys.
Right.
And there's a value in that, actually.
And so Coco was losing to the mid-card guys. He was losing to the upper-card guys, but he was beating the jobbers. And, oh, by the way, the matches that he was losing, they were not on TV. So unless you were one of the, you know, maybe 20,000 people that were in the building, you didn't know. Like, you didn't know that Coco did the job for the Honky Tonk Man in New Haven, Connecticut, or wherever it was. You wouldn't have known that. All you know is that you're seeing him win every single week on television.
Exactly.
And, you know, so in that way, having Butch Reed beat him meant something. Because now people have tuned in, and to them, Coco's a winner. Because he always wins on TV.
Yeah, and I mean, it sets up, you know, a guy like Butch Reed that, you know, hey, maybe you can build on that, you know, depending on what they want to do with a character. And yeah, I think there's some things about, you know, old school wrestling that, you know, I think really work and could really work even today. Clearly there's a lot of things that just would not work today. But this is something that, you know, actually, if a promotion did it, or actually even if WWE did it, I think it could work still.
And speaking of things that don't work nowadays, Jesse Ventura. Oh, man. So Coco Ware, you know, he always wore that one glove.
Yes. Yep.
Jesse goes, "What's with that glove, Monsoon? Michael Jackson wears a glove, but Buckwheat don't." And I'm just like,
yeah.
Oh, that probably wouldn't hold up well today, Jesse.
You know, there's we could probably actually do an entire show of racial sensitivity brought to you by professional wrestling.
Absolutely. There's actually another comment that's going to come up in another episode that we do, where Bobby Heenan makes a comment that was really similar to that, and I had to stop and write it down because I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. How do you do that?
And I mean, you know, I think too, when you look at this, you can sort of, you know, pro wrestling in a lot of ways is a reflection of the era and society it takes place in.
Absolutely.
And I think you can sort of see, you know, we're, you know, give or take 30 odd years removed from this match, and from this event, but you can sort of see where we have, you know, kind of moved. I mean, I think in in the late 80s, that comment wouldn't have registered anything.
No,
it was sort of
no,
a throwaway line. You say that today on a show, you're basically the next day you're fired.
Yeah, you're probably looking for employment.
You know, absolutely. So I mean, that's, you know, I think overall that's probably a good thing that we've progressed to that. But
yes, yes,
yeah, and I think that's going to be kind of, you know, I've often wondered, you know, with the way with the network and the control that WWE has of these shows, certainly we have seen things be edited out of what's in the library today.
Yeah.
And you wonder eventually will some of this get edited out, to make it look a more family-friendly product for, 2019 as opposed to a family-friendly product in 1987.
Absolutely. Well, the last match for this episode, Savage and Steamboat.
One of the all-time greats. You ask most people, it's one of the greatest matches you've ever watched.
This
is up there.
And obviously it's interesting that you bring that up because I have really tried to get into this match. And I don't know if it's because I try to compare it to the Hogan match that came later. Obviously, like technically speaking, okay, if you're not going to show the Hogan Andre match to a wrestling school student.
No.
I mean, probably not. But like Savage and Steamboat, okay, yeah, they take it really technically, but in some ways, I wonder if, because we're just watching it at WrestleMania 3, if we miss like a lot of the emotion that built into that.
Yes.
Because obviously I know they were feuding, but it's like, man, like to me, it's like the match is like really crisp and technical and this, that, and the other, but it doesn't have that that you look for in like a match that maybe would be like a really, really elite match.
Well, I think, if you look at it from a technical standpoint, it's a great match. I think the difference is, that was a pretty heated feud with those guys.
Yeah.
It's also going for the second most important title in the Federation at the time, the Intercontinental Championship.
Right.
And you almost, for it to be that, have much emotion built around it, I think that's the one thing that match was lacking. I think part of it, these guys were going at such a pace and trying to put on, I think, a technical masterpiece that maybe they kind of left out a little bit of the psychology and emotion and storytelling that might have taken this match to just a different level.
Yeah. I can see that. And then obviously, another little layer was Savage's feud with George Steele.
Absolutely.
Who he had wrestled at WrestleMania 2, and then the whole George Steele thing with Liz. So there was that. Match starts off. You've got those two big arm drags from Ricky Steamboat. Ricky Steamboat had an incredible looking arm drag. And even later in life, he still did, because you saw how good he was when he did it at Mania 25.
Right.
With Jericho. And then he lifts Savage up in that chokehold. Just such an iconic image. With that, Savage goes after the throat, gives a really sharp-looking standing knee drop to Steamboat. Macho does the standard spot that he does, where he gets like tied up in the top in the second rope. And one thing that you notice is with the commentators, Monsoon is always like a face commentator and Ventura is always a heel commentator. Not as obvious as it became like in later years with other commentators. But Monsoon is making like every excuse under the sun for Ricky Steamboat, just breaking rules and stuff like that. And Ventura is just like, he's pointing out everything. He's like, I bet if Randy Savage was doing that, you'd be all over it, saying he was a cheater and everything else. Which, I think that ends up being a really, it's like, Jesse's kind of got a point.
Well, and I think that's we'll see that a little bit later in wrestling history. Where, hey, you can be a face and break the rules. If that was a concrete law, we would not have Stone Cold Steve Austin.
That's definitely true.
But I think then it was, that was a big deal. And I think it's kind of interesting that they kind of called that out on it.
Yeah. Steamboat takes a bump out into the crowd. George Steele comes out and helps him back in. Obviously, Jesse Ventura is just jumping all over that. The ref is just completely not even counting. Macho hits the big axe handle coming off the top rope down to the floor.
Well, and I think what's amazing, I've read that I guess, pretty much Savage had this entire match planned out, almost move for move. And I think that says something to, how important he at least felt it was. And I think, ultimately, you have two guys in this match that can just really go.
Right. So they were moving incredibly fast as they're sort of going to the finish. And there's this one spot where I'm looking, and I was watching it on my TV. Like I alternate between watching like on my computer screen or on the TV. And you can look, and it's one of the Hebner brothers, and he is blown up. He is completely blown up. He's like pulling at his shirt. Like you can see like these massive like sweat stains in his armpits. He's breathing heavy. Like he's just completely lathered with sweat and just blown up because they're moving so fast and he's having to get up and down. Going to the ending, you get Macho hitting an elbow. He goes out trying to get the bell from the ring because the ref took a bump. Sting takes the bell, or George Steele, not Sting. We won't see him in WWE for a long time.
Yeah, don't confuse the fans at home.
I know. George the Animal Steele takes the bell from Macho Man. Macho pushes him down, gets the bell back. Steele shoves him off the top rope. Tries to get him in a body slam, and then he gets rolled up for the 1-2-3. And that's the match. Ricky Steamboat comes out the champ.
And also, this is a match that starts to sort of, we look at upward trajectory. This starts launching Savage into that upper level,
Right, yeah.
He's not going to be Hogan, but he could be right below Hogan.
Yeah, so, after this, Savage sort of makes that move into the main event, where he does become a main event talent.
And I think it's important, too, he went, he's defeated with a roll-up. It's not like he just, got the crap kicked out of him.
Right.
So, it keeps him, he loses the belt, but he still looks strong. And as a heel, he can play off of that. It's easy for heels to say, hey, you got lucky, on and on. And, of course, Savage will excel at that.
Yeah, and I guess I'll go ahead and spoil it because, I've watched, I think 8 or 9 episodes ahead in Primetime Wrestling, and it doesn't come up. But that's actually, if you look up a Randy Savage promo, that's one of the ones that comes up is the one that he gave immediately after WrestleMania 7. I don't think it wasn't the one where he's out there with like the coffee creamers or anything like that. I don't think. Don't hold me to that. But where he's talking about, there was outside interference and George Steele came in here and Jack Tunney messed me over, and you've got stuff like that. And like, even though he's the heel, like you sit there and you're like, well, yeah, if you're being objective here, he's got a point. George Steele pushed him up the top rope.
Yep.
And that was something Jesse Ventura was going crazy about. He's like, that was blatant outside interference. And you're like, yeah, Jess, you got a point, man.
Well, I think that's the, you'll see later, as we kind of talked about. But then, hey, yeah, I think, it builds layers to a character. And it also kind of plants the seeds maybe in some fans' minds to kind of start liking the guy a little bit. Because, you're going to see Savage when he was a heel. He worked tremendously as a heel. Some of his best work, frankly, was when he was a heel. But he could also be a very captivating babyface, which he was, for good part of his career.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else for the Savage Steamboat match?
I think that's about it. I mean, certainly the longest match of the show. Yeah, but that's, hey, you got two good workers in the ring. They can do that.
I don't actually have it in front of me. What was it actually the longest match of the show? I mean,
it was.
It had the most moves, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's actually I'm looking at it right now. Their match went 14 minutes and 35 seconds. Next closest was the main event, which went just a second over 12 minutes.
Oh, okay. I actually thought the main event might have gone like 15. Spoiler alert, we'll get into this one next time, but Andre locked Hulk in a bear hug that was like 3 minutes long.
Right.
That's the only reason I legitimately thought it went more than 15, was just for how long Andre had him in that bear hug. There certainly wasn't more moves in that Hulk Hogan match.
No.
By any stretch of the imagination.
Well, and also if Hogan and Andre tried to go at that pace, well, I don't think there was an ambulance big enough to take Andre out of the building.
Oh, yeah, they couldn't have. I think Andre was moving just about as fast as he could.
Yeah.
Which was, at that point, was, basically nothing. But obviously we will get to that one next week in the next episode.
Absolutely. Well, I think, leaving off with Steamboat and Savage, I think is a good point.
Absolutely. And so, as we wrap it up this week, if you're listening out there and you want to get in touch with us, we are on Instagram and Twitter at Friday Evenings Undercard. You can get with us on Gmail, Friday Evenings Undercard at gmail.com, and we're on Facebook, Friday Evenings Undercard. We'll be coming to you every week, obviously on Friday in the evening. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.